So we're going to be talking today about Bitcoin and the fourth wave of computing. And four waves of computing, the stuff I'm going to review today, four waves of computing, what's the story of kind of each new wave and why they happened, and then what it means for us. And this is going to be a little bit of a higher level talk. I know a lot of talks at this conference have been pretty detailed and pretty in the weeds. But I think it is super important that we don't lose the forest for being amongst the trees. And so providing some context to what we're doing, we were thinking a lot about this at Casa, and so I figured I would share some of how we approach this world and how we think about the world, the computing world, out of this. We've often told people that we are a computing company, and I think that that's been a little confusing for people, but hoping to provide some more context for that today. So I'm going to run through all of this. I will hopefully get some questions at the end. I'm sure there will be some questions, but yeah, we'll dive in. So who am I? I am Jeremy Welch. I am the founder CEO of Casa, of over a decade building startups. Just some context on kind of why I'm approaching this space and thinking about this space. Studied political philosophy at the Duke Bitcoin conference, actually with Matt Carollo, who is here. We're old friends, and but the startups that I worked on, some of them were in the advertising industry. Worked on one in electric car charging, in health tech, a couple different areas, but have seen a number of startups, a number of industries. The advertising stuff in particular was interesting because I learned that the internet is an advertising-based internet. So all of the companies that I came to kind of renew my understanding of a lot of internet companies being advertising companies rather than the kind of internet companies or the consumer use case I knew them as. Yahoo is one of these that everybody knew as just another search engine. Most people didn't know that they were the largest publisher of websites and then ad units to go on those websites in the world for a long time, and then they were overtaken by Facebook. But everything was an advertising. The entire internet was advertising-based, data sales, all this other stuff, and that kind of sets us up. So we're going to talk about the details of what that model looked like, and then and get into the other waves and how we kind of built up to that, and then where we think things are going today. So what is Casa? And Casa is kind of what I'm representing here. Casa today is the best personal key system on the planet. And we're building the best personal computing on the planet from that. And what that looks like in practice is Keymaster in every pocket and a Casa node in every home. And so I'm hoping to kind of illustrate why that's important. But it's not just me. It is an awesome team. Elena, who is here, and Carolyn, who is here. Jameson, who visited us from his perch in the metaverse yesterday. We've got great designers, a lot of engineers, and a lot of anonymous people. But it's not just me. It's important to kind of note that this is a movement, and our team has grown very fast because of the fact that we all kind of saw edges of this thing that I'm going to describe. And so as we all started talking, it just kind of clicked amongst all of us that, yes, this is the direction things are heading in, so let's work together and let's move it faster to get there. So our mission as a company is to maximize personal sovereignty and safety. And how does that relate to Bitcoin? How does that relate to computing? Well, beyond the price hype is a computing revolution. This is not just about money. It's not, money actually underlies a lot of our other systems. So I would say that the internet as a whole, as an advertising-based system, was actually dependent on the kind of lower levels of fintech. And so as fintech changes, the kind of higher level computation, the higher level computing models also change. But it's important to note that that this is a computing revolution. It's not just about finance. It is kind of revolutionizing everything. And specifically, we're in this transition from fragile hierarchies into more resilient networks, from these large centralized systems into, again, a much more distributed system. And so the four waves of computing, I'm going to dive through those. Starts with mainframe computing and local apps. And it starts actually even before this, but I think that this is where, especially on a large business scale, this is where things really scale. But prior to this, you had code breaking machines in across the two great wars, and then as as we get into the 50s, 60s, 70s, IBM is dominating across mainframe computing, and these are local apps. And when I say mainframe computer, I mean mainframe computer, right? Like it is built, it is filling out a full room. I've got two photos here. So one is an older IBM machine, and then we have a newer IBM 360 machine, and the hairstyles have changed. This color, or it's a color photo, but it is it is the same large mainframe computers. And what's interesting out of this is that they're all local applications, right? So all the applications that are happening amongst it's a lot of custom code, but these are large businesses that are buying these, and just large install. It's very expensive, and so again, this is mainframe computing, local apps, and this first major wave. The next wave is personal computing and local apps. And we have an old Windows 95 logo, an early Mac logo, and the desktop computer. So we condensed down from these massive infrastructures, these massive computers, into something that is much smaller. But there's still local apps, and that's important. So it became personal computing instead of mainframe computing, but more local applications. Why every kid should have an Apple after school. During this transition, the marketing changes, the use cases change, the target market changes. If you look at the ad, so they're selling, improving your kids, or they're really selling to parents, right? But they're selling, you're improving your kid's life, you're giving your kid a better life. They're linking this to having a nutritious apple, right? A food that you would, sustenance that you would give your kid. There's a lot of subtlety in the background of this ad. So you've got, flight simulator there. There is a Motley Crue flag somewhere in there. So there's a kind of an edge of revolution and an edge of metal. But it's still, it's still accessible. It's still, you've got the hamster wheel. It's still kind of a kid, but kind of becoming something more. And this is very, very different than that whole wave of mainframe computing that originally developed. And I do want to mention too that at the time when all of this was out, early IBM execs were shaking their heads like there's no way these would sell on desktops. And then IBM capitulated too and started producing IBM PCs. So these waves, you constantly have naysayers during each one. But in terms of applications, they're still local. And you started seeing some growth of new types of applications, specifically games. How many people in here played early Wolfenstein or Doom? Yeah, lots of hands going up. Awesome. And how many of you remember kind of hanging out with your friends and you would just take turns and on a keyboard, no game controller, you would take turns. You're not playing together. It's totally separate. It's kind of one-player experiences. But you're at least sitting there in the room together, I mean, this is totally unique, totally new experience, and those massive monitors.
You're making us feel old, man.
And then that evolves. I was there too. So that evolves into this, which is LAN parties, right? Quake 3, Unreal Tournament. I mean, Quake 2. Early, there's that whole experience. You felt a level of buzz there. And nobody knew that kind of Fortnite would eventually come out of something like this. And I don't know how many of your parents told you, get off the computer. You're wasting your time. But it's something new. It's something different. The model is different. It's condensed down into these much smaller devices. It's personal. The use cases are personal, but they're still local. So even the networking, this is much closer to what was happening with the mainframe computers in the sense that you had kind of local applications within the building, but it's still not widely networked. It's still not games across. You had some edges of ARPANET developing through the 70s, 80s, and then eventually we got to the kind of network computing age. But it is important to kind of put in context that even LAN parties, you were still just playing against each other in the room. So again, personal computing and local apps during this second wave. So that brings us to the third wave, which we consider to be mainframe computing and network applications. So like the first wave, this is marked by these massive rooms full of computers that have no direct interface, but a very different type of application, so a network type of application, but massive, massive, again, rooms full of computers, centralized, the amount of computing power too around these. It's not distributed. The core amount of, or the majority of computing is happening in these data centers. And what that looks like on the consumer end is a thin client, right? So everybody's phone, everybody's laptop, a lot of the work that you're doing today, you're still interfacing with some sort of outside data center. And we don't always think of it that way. But how many of your apps, as soon as you lose a connection, they just stop working? How many, even something like Spotify, right? If it can't phone home after a long enough period, it stops working. You have to re-sign in to make sure that, they want to make sure that any of your synced songs, that you're not trying to get around the subscription fees. So everything is still dependent on these massive centralized data centers in a centralized model. And a lot of our desktops have gone away. A lot of those, we don't have the CRT monitors anymore. They've blended into just a screen. Some people still buy iMacs and other desktop computers, but for the most part, things have just blended into screens, and they've all become thin clients, literally thin. But everything is still backed by this massive computing power. And so again, just kind of the whole thin client idea. In school, the same thing is happening, and so a lot of services, what used to be that you would take a laptop or you'd have a calculator with you for some test or something, a lot of the note taking, everything is shifting towards this newer model. And I dropped out of school when I went and worked on some startups, and the one that we sold into Google, and then I went back and finished up. And I had this bizarre experience where the iPad wasn't even out, and I showed up to my first day of class, a little bit older, and with all these young kids finishing up undergrad, and walked in, and I had no thought to be taking notes or something on an iPad. I walk in, and literally half the room is iPads, and it hit me that when I was previously in school, the iPad didn't even exist. It wasn't even out yet. And here, half the kids are taking notes on the iPads, syncing them to the cloud. I mean, the model totally changed. So across the board, all kinds of new applications. We saw the rise of Facebook and Google out of this. And I'm going to talk about kind of why these shifts happen in a minute. But it is kind of important to see how with each kind of successive wave, you typically get a new series of companies, a new series of apps. Things feel very different, and also during each phase, you get a lot of naysayers, and a lot of times those naysayers are viewing things through an older model, right? So that brings us to what we think we're on the edge of today, which is personal computing and network apps. And Bitcoin is the best representation of this. It is important, the fact that Bitcoin is independent and Bitcoin is running itself, and there's no centralized third party. There are a number of third parties that are all working on the protocol, but it is independent. And this kind of network we've got kind of edge of lightning in here, and we've got some Ethereum nodes that are connecting over there on the corners. But ultimately the fact that these are all connecting to each other, maybe we should actually have a big Ethereum hub right there in the middle. Maybe I should for Infura. But ultimately, I mean, what we are talking about here is that you do have, it is a distributed system, and this is different. This is very different. We've had network applications before, but there is something very different about this. We had the edges of peer-to-peer with BitTorrent and file sharing, and we've seen some behavior like this, but in terms of a massive application that everybody's interacting with and a massive kind of computing platform, this has not existed before. In terms of something that you could build on, like you would have built on a Facebook or built on a Google in terms of developer tools. This hasn't existed before. So it is something totally new, this kind of personal computing and network apps model. And we think that the validation, everything else around this is really important and different. And so what that looks like in practice in terms of the new technologies that are growing around this, we have a miner here, we have a Trezor, we have a Casa node, and we do still have, it doesn't mean that data centers are going away. It doesn't mean that a lot of the technology and infrastructure that was built up is totally going away. It's still going to be around, but it's just going to be used differently. And I think it is indicative that you had totally new companies that rose up. So you have Bitmain, a number of other large mining companies that grew out of this area. It wasn't just Google or Facebook that started dominating this mining space. You had a totally new company, Trezor, that came out in terms of managing your keys and doing signing. And that's also a break in the former model. We went with the third wave model. We went for 20, 30 years with all the data, all the computation, everything really being in these data centers. Now, you would use the thin client and you would approve something and that would get uploaded to the data center, but the real store of state was always in the data center, and the real store of truth was always in the data center. And this is different. So whenever you have a Trezor or a Ledger or a hardware wallet and you're doing, or a Casa node, and you're doing some local validation, some local signing, it is something very, very different. It's the edge of something very, very different, to where you have this local compute, you have this local validation, you have this local storage that this outside entity, the outside kind of cloud server is totally unaware of. When you do signing, there's no, so something like, and I would start grouping companies even by kind of what wave the companies are playing to. So something like a Coinbase or some of the more centralized parties really play towards the kind of old model, to where it is a centralized service and it's built more like the old model, but it's kind of getting us to start thinking in the new model, where each of the companies represented here, so miners and hardware wallet providers and node providers and the key management service that we provide, kind of is starting to sit and push towards this newer model. How many people saw the Lightning trust chain? Awesome. So it's also, I think, indicative. So this is, for people that don't know, this is Jack passing the torch, the Lightning Trust torch, to Starkness, and Andreas sitting in their background. I haven't been able to figure out, I can't tell if Pomp or someone else just stretching over there, and HODLNOT. And this is from Crypto Scam Hub. There have been a ton of memes that have come out during this process. But the reason why I selected this image and wanted to kind of show this image, I've shown a few other images of what it was like in terms of the kind of day-to-day interactions and core interactions with the other models. And I think this is really representative of kind of where we're going. There's something really important about the fact that this was all started by HODLNOT, right? Who nobody knows who that is. It's a third party. It's just a pseudonym. In the age of Facebook and Google, we trended towards all having our real names somehow associated online. The true cypherpunks, of course, just totally stayed away from any of those services. But for the vast majority of people, your real names were listed places, and we're shifting back towards something that is identity is going to be more distributed as well as the compute distributes. But there's something really important about this image. Also, just like generating memes and sharing memes, and that whole phenomenon is definitely something that took off during this third wave, where you had all these network connections. And I think that that what's interesting about this too is that when the memes get offensive, right? When the memes start, we're starting to get to this period to where a lot of the platforms are now abusing their power. And when there are things that you're not supposed to say or not supposed to do, people are just getting deplatformed. So, and the new waves and what people have kind of taken to start doing and around Bitcoin and around any of the kind of this fourth wave is again kind of going under pseudonyms. But I think we're going to see a lot more content. I think from the application side, there'll be a lot more aggressive memes and aggressive content. But it's also, this is a virtual image, right? It's not people interacting in the pure physical world. It's some kind of a representation of that. And we saw edges of that. We saw edges of that with with gaming and with the LAN parties and with these other pieces, but it's something much bigger in the fact that a lot of people will only be doing this, and like Jameson kind of calling in yesterday, he wasn't signing his video or doing anything else to indicate that it was actually Jameson and not a deep fake, right? So even a lot of the kind of old models of communicating, there will be more pseudonyms. There will be more identities that are kind of totally going dark. There's a lot of changes that are coming from that, and then using this model of validating, using keys, we'll be doing a lot of signing and a lot of different things in this model, but kind of doing some similar behaviors. So this is again common through each wave. We've seen people where we've seen that some of the use cases survive. You end up with some new use cases, some new apps. You end up with some new ways of doing some things, and we're going to see that during this too. But I just thought this was indicative, passing the torch. Even the idea of the kind of lightning trust chain of passing that around between these totally anonymous people, I think is something native to what is now brewing. So Bitcoin is an impenetrable fortress of validation. Again, kind of what this looks like in practice, and with this is from Stop and Decrypt, and it's awesome too that I'm like sucking all these images down from just totally random people. I expect that to continue too. We're going to do a lot of work and never meet or never see the person that's behind the veil. But what's important about this is, how many people have seen this before, by the way, like this image? Okay, good. So what's important about this image is it's really giving more weight to and describing the weight of running a node, running a full node, versus just doing mining. A lot of people, when they're thinking of the model from the third wave, and they're thinking of the strength and the weight that Facebook and Google and these large, the owners, the CapEx owners, the compute owners, they see the mining companies as being the major players in control, where it's really the masses of individuals that are doing the actual validating of the network that are the ones in control. And yes, miners are doing some validating, but if a block is produced that is wrong, it's not going to be accepted by the majority of the network. It's going to be rejected. We've seen a case already where this was tested around the whole SegWit 2x scenario, and where large companies that would have been like a Google or a Facebook, they colluded, they worked behind the scenes, they were trying to drive a narrative and trying to increase the block size, and it failed, right? And that is something really, really, really significant in context. So impenetrable fortress of validation, this validation piece is really important, but this again kind of accrues to this being just a totally different model, and I think the things that will come out of this will be very different. So again, we're back to personal computing and network apps as kind of a reminder of this. So 4 waves of computing: mainframe computing, local apps, personal computing, local apps, back to mainframe computing, but network apps, so different types of apps, and then to personal computing and network apps. And we're just on the edge of this 4th wave. So what's the story here? Why have we gone through these shifts? How did these shifts happen? Why is this new shift happening? The first wave, I mean, you're just shifting from business computing towards personal computing, and the business shifted. The new business opportunity was around servicing a new market, which was personal computing. It was the individual consumer. And as via Moore's law, as we had shrinking components, we were able to pack them into smaller and smaller devices and come up with new use cases and attack this new market. So it took Steve Jobs to drive and believe in this new market and build something totally new. But it is going, mainframe devices and local apps, personal devices, local apps. It is a kind of market opportunity side, and it's spreading the benefits of computing to the consumer, not just from the large institutions and businesses. The second wave to the third wave, from local computing to network computing, was about connecting all consumers and businesses together through these central intermediaries. And the reason for the central intermediaries, and this is a really important point, is that the payments tech is the real reason for those central intermediaries. A lot of it was around the cost of doing business, the cost of collecting payments, the cost of running a business. Now you've had a lot of tech, a lot of distributed tech that was from open source projects commonly, but a lot of the major developments came from these central intermediaries, and the way that they fueled themselves was through payments tech. A lot of people don't know that, so Airbnb, actually some of their earliest tech, they built their own payments processor. And one of the reasons, we evolved, one of the apps that we tried to build early on in a more distributed way was around home sharing. And we were thinking about this question of just searching amongst friends. Like, why can't you use Airbnb or any of the other home sharing applications, link in your friends and just search amongst your friends and get somebody's house to stay? Now, there are some other platforms around like couch surfing and that kind of thing that are totally free and don't have a strong business model, but especially amongst the major players, you can't do that. And the easy reason is you would be able to route around the payment processor that they have. If you knew the people you were staying with, you can easily pass money into the table and totally route around this kind of validation system, identity system, and payment system that they have, right? So this entire, and then this also feeds into the advertising portion or the advertising piece of the internet. The fact that the entire business model of Google, Facebook, some of the other major players is all advertising. It's all data sales, it's all advertising. It's surveillance capitalism, right? It's bullshit. And it's something that as I worked in this industry and was seeing the amount of data that was sucked down, and as you're building these large data centers to do some level of compute for an app, the cost of adding more data is not large for these centralized companies. And so they just keep adding more and more and more data. They keep doing more and more sales and figure out new ways to slice it and dice it and resell it, and build more advertising sales around this. And then we've ended up kind of where we are today with them having all this power. And as these intermediaries have become all powerful, they've started abusing that data access. And so we've got story after story today of abuses of the access to this data. And it is really important that we start to work and come up with ways to get off of these centralized providers. So that's the third wave to the fourth wave, where it brings us to where we are now. And they're very fragile, the connections amongst these centralized providers. I do think that they will break pretty easy. And this also includes, so I didn't include any banks. I mean, that's where people are already commonly talking about the Federal Reserve banks and what Bitcoin will do to the banks. But I think that this is kind of undersaid, how the effects of what this will do to some of the massive players in computing as well. And again, it comes back to payment tech is the kind of core reason that a lot of these centralized providers were able to thrive. And now that we have Bitcoin and we have Lightning and we can start routing around those and build new applications that sit on top of this stuff, we do strongly believe as a company that we could see the end of Facebook and Google, and they will either have to rebuild themselves or somebody will rebuild the same tech on these kind of new systems in this new wave and overtake them. So what this new wave comes down to, though, is protecting all network parties with encryption and open protocols, right? And encryption and local validation protect individuals against these central intermediaries. So there will still be central intermediaries. We will still have large-scale data center companies and computation, but the individuals will be able to protect themselves. And this validation piece is important. Encryption piece is important. We've already started to see a lot of the messaging applications drifting towards heavy encryption, even as they get bought by these major players and they start, they're still trying to figure out ways to monetize the data. So Facebook is now merging all of their messaging applications, so across their core messenger, Instagram, and across WhatsApp. They're all going to have the same backend. They are planning for it to stay encrypted, is what they're saying. But from what I've heard or from what I've read, they're planning to monetize the metadata. So the metadata around how those are all connected is how they're planning to monetize. And so again, still, they're continuing to go down this model of taking data, abstracting it somehow. But there's no guarantee that metadata, that abstracted metadata, will not be somehow compromisable. And now the stakes are much higher. So getting back to Bitcoin being an impenetrable fortress of validation, this is a different model. It is, and from the successive waves, it will enable new methods of doing computation and of building apps. And so, our mission to maximize personal sovereignty and safety, the way our approach around this is if the idea there is that using encryption and local validation is the way to combat this, then kind of if we're trying to maximize personal sovereignty and safety, if we simplify encryption and we simplify validation, the use of those two, then we can go down this path of starting to build new computing applications to compete against the kind of old model. And so that, again, key master in every pocket, Casa node in every home, that's where we're driving towards. That's where other companies in this space are driving towards. But we really should be driving towards away from these centralized models of key management and node management. And the space is growing lightning fast, right? So January 2018, we were here. December 2018, we're here. The Lightning Network, just insane. January 2018, we are here in terms of setting up a Lightning node, command line access. When we released a GUI around this and kind of plug and play version. There are a few other products out there. We're supportive of anybody that's building better interfaces so we can get more people into this world. And so to review, the 4 waves of computing: mainframe computing, local apps, personal computing, local apps, mainframe computing, and network apps. And then now what we see is personal computing, but network apps. And again, beyond the price hype, there is a computing revolution at work. And a lot of the work you're doing is leading towards, I think, a much bigger wave. And in the coming years, I think we'll see some much bigger applications beyond just passing the lightning torch around. Bitcoin is an impenetrable fortress of validation. This is why this new model is possible. And so what do you do from here? Manage your keys and get a node. It doesn't matter how you do it, just manage your keys, get a node. I think a lot of you already are doing this. But it is important to tell other people to do this. Like, this is the way you participate in the new world that we're building. And a reminder that we're in this together. There's a lot of infighting amongst it's very tribal amongst even all of the different cryptocurrencies. That is an okay thing as long as we remember that ultimately we're doing this to tackle the big guys, Facebook, Google, all these other companies. And there will be major attacks from some of these companies. There will be major attacks from state actors. I think that one of the interesting things is that the Bitcoin community was hardened early on because I think everybody realized what we were up against in terms of central banks, in terms of other intelligence organizations and government organizations. But I think that the next boss battle is not actually getting to government yet. It's actually going to be around Facebook and Google and attacks from these large computing companies, because as we build more applications and make it more useful for the average person, that's how we're going to suck them into the Bitcoin layer as well, to the payments layer as well. So we're in this together, and definitely remember that, and try to collaborate across lines when we can, as long as it's kind of supporting this core thing. So anyways, thank you, Jeremy at team.casa. If you have any questions after this, or if I can be helpful in any way, we are always looking to collaborate and support with people. Store.casa if you want to buy any of our products, services. And yeah, thanks for having me.
Awesome.
Got a question over here.
You got a question? All right, we got time for one question.
Thank you. So actually, your closing remark was, I think, very relevant in terms of scaling. So you've mentioned Facebook, Google, I guess multiple times.
Yep.
But it's hard to ignore that they do provide quite robust infrastructure. So what's your view on using Google Cloud, for example, AWS, for example, and using these services and the robustness that they provide for, let's say, HSM,
Yep.
Hardware security modules,
Sure.
KMS, VMs, compute engines, cloud functions.
Yep.
All of these, could help scale, quite quickly. So what's your view on using these services for these sort of services?
Sure. So I think what you're getting to too is that a lot of apps are built on top of these clouds, right? a lot of the existing apps from, I would say, the third wave are built on top of these clouds. As long as you're using, that is okay in the fourth wave, as long as you're still using local key management and you're still using some sort of local validation. So whatever computation is done in the cloud, a user should be able to locally validate it if they want to. And we're gonna have tech like Neutrino and things will run on mobile phones like clients, and that's great too. But you will need to validate at times, and there will be attacks. And the stakes are high because now you're managing lots of money, you're managing your own user data. The user applications you'll have will be incredible, but we need to push this model of enabling local key management and local validation of data for anything that's done in the cloud. As long as you do that, we'll still be able to use their services.
All right, speaking of lightning, we have one more question and one answer in that kind of speed.
Thanks. I'm sure this is an easy question to answer. So one of the services that some of these large centralized intermediaries provide is reputation.
Yep.
You know, they're sort of authorities that give you reputation for payments or whatever. Can we build reputation systems anonymous? As you said, you know, people are pseudonymous or anonymous. How do we build anonymous reputation systems?
That's a great question. I don't have the full answer for that, but what I would say is that I think that, first off, I think that a lot of the centralized providers are losing their reputations and are losing. We're starting to learn that a lot of reviews on Amazon are totally fake. We're starting to learn that a lot of the data around ad views and impressions, et cetera, for a lot of these players, totally fake, botnets, right? So one, that's eroding. Two, I would say that a lot of it is going to be built off of local trust and just interacting like this kind of lightning network, passing the torch. Well, that's how we basically have to bootstrap and rebuild trust from the beginning, and it will all be, and we're in the era of deep fakes now, which is going to make it even more complicated. So I think it's going to come down to person, kind of rebuilding social networks, scanning each other's keys, revalidating keys all the time. It'll be painful at first, but once that framework is there, and once you're having a lot of this local validation and local key management, the strength of that will be a lot higher, be a lot more resilient, and a lot easier to prevent fakes, fake reputation, fake botnets, et cetera. So in the long run, it'll be better, but it's going to take a while to get there.
Awesome. Thank you.
Cool. Thanks.